Today on The Nation Speaks, Democrat State Representative Vernon Jones continues to campaign hard for Republicans in Georgia. And what do the polls say for the Peach State? Hello and welcome to The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Drucare. We're going to start off today with a very special holiday edition of America Q&A.
I guess because, COVID happened and all that stuff, and we were all forced to, job-wise, some of us were unemployed. So I ended up going to Maryland to visit my sister. All the family was there, so we ended up being there for like 3 months with our family, and I guess that was a good memory, I hadn't seen them in a while.
My first day with my girlfriend.
It was supposed to be my daughter's wedding on August. But what happened, the wedding was canceled. It was supposed to be like a big party back home in Jordan. She's a pharmacist. She works at Walgreens also. So she got married in a very small gathering. So yeah, this is one of the best memories that I have in 2020.
The birth of my daughter, my newborn.
Probably our family trip to Tennessee.
Honestly, I have to say today, only because I got off work really early, I did what I had to do, and now I'm just strolling downtown, like it's beautiful.
It was actually on her birthday. Yes, I didn't have no money. I was out of work. I was just in an accident. I was trying to figure out what was I going to do. So I went outside just to get some fresh air, exercise my knee, and there was this Amazon box sitting at my door. 1 second, baby. There's this Amazon box sitting at my door, and when I opened it, it was an anonymous gift from someone named William, and it had $500 on the card. So I was able to get my daughter a good Christmas.
Almost all of it. It's been a really good year for me. It's forced me to get out of my comfort zone. It's opened up a new avenue for me as far as financial goes. I've got no complaints with 2020. I like it.
Hanging out with my babes right here, obviously.
Being able to spend time with family during this event that we've been going through.
The countdown into the new year.
Probably skating with my brother over there. Me and him go everywhere together, so we always skate around.
My best memory from 2020 is the good times before coronavirus.
My best memory from 2020 was getting the opportunity to work on a children's book with a local company that helps people improve themselves and basically better their lives and understand responsibilities and stuff like that.
Coming here to Florida, I came to visit my son and my granddaughter was born. So that was a great gift for me and a blessing to come from Pennsylvania to Florida. And I get to spend time with the baby and my son and my other granddaughter, Daniela.
It had to be going back to school.
My best memory of 2020 is my daughter. I have a newborn and the family bonding time that we got to do this year. Definitely that.
Well, Hannah, definitely. Having her, she was born September 21st.
Just getting together at Thanksgiving despite everyone telling us not to. We had a great time.
Back in February when I visited my grandchildren and got to play with them, put my arms around them, took for granted that I would see them in 2 months, and now I'm in December and I haven't seen them since other than on Skype.
Getting closer with the family.
I went on a wonderful vacation to North Carolina with my husband at the end of the summer, and we had a wonderful time. So that was my favorite memory.
Well, we don't have a lot of good memories because of COVID, but I think because we've been able to avoid it so far, that's been a blessing.
I got married this year. Thank you. It was supposed to be a courthouse wedding, but the court's closed, so we just did it out in a park.
I had my oldest son graduated from high school, so that was a big one, but then it was also unique because of the way that they had to graduate. And he also started college in the fall. So those two things combined, I got to spend extra time with him because of COVID, so for that I'm grateful.
Just taking time to spend time with friends and develop friendships and not make excuses to do something else and be totally busy.
Oh, I think this kind of tops it, coming to Orlando to visit my sister, surprise her for Christmas. She wasn't able to come. up for Christmas this year. We live in Indiana. And I got accepted for a new house this year. That definitely tops it as well.
You know, when I had to fly home from me and lots of other people and get lucky to get no flights canceled after it was booked, people were very helpful. The Australians and also some people who were on the ship, and you caught and gave you a helping hand. And the best was when I came to Orlando, it turned out some gentleman got my overhead stuff out because I was exhausted, and also helped me getting my luggage and get to the taxi stand. And there were two other friends. It turned out they were military.
Yes, I have some time off, and I do a lot of research, and I learn a lot what's happening, going on around the world. So many mainstream media never tell.
I think just bettering myself. A lot of things got taken away. I had a lot of stuff planned, and COVID and all that changed everything. But it gave me opportunity to spend a lot of time with myself and had a lot of personal growth.
On Tuesday, Georgians will decide who controls the Senate. If the Democrats win both Senate seats that are up for grabs, it's an even House with the vice president acting as tiebreaker. If the Republicans can keep just one of those seats, they'll retain a majority, albeit a slim one. Joining us today is Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones. He's a lifelong Democrat who's thrown his full support behind Donald Trump and these two Republican candidates. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'd like to start off just by asking you, why are you campaigning so hard in Georgia for these Republican candidates? What's at stake in your mind?
It's very simple. And as you know, all minds are on Georgia right now. We have to hold the line here. We have to hold the line on funding police to make sure that defunding doesn't take place. We have to hold the line on keeping socialism from coming in our communities. We have to hold the line to make sure our kids have an opportunity to have school choice. Right now, as you know, many of our children are in failed schools, trapped in failed schools based on Democratic policies. And so there's so much at stake. And more importantly, when you look at where Georgia is, so goes Georgia, so goes this country. We have to hold the line. We have to make sure there's a balance of power in Washington so we can continue to block the left from taking us off this cliff.
So you've been very vocal in stating that you think there's been voter fraud in Georgia. And earlier in the week, there was a ruling not allowing 4,000 names to be purged from the voter rolls that were found to be, out of state, people who had moved. And that ruling came from Judge Leslie Abrams Gardner, who's the sister of Stacey Abrams, who is a failed gubernatorial candidate, who's a close ally of Joe Biden. A lot of people are saying that was political. Is that your opinion of that, on her ruling, or do you think the case had merit?
Well, let's say this. I won't say it's so much voter fraud as it's been election fraud. Election fraud is a lot broader, meaning that there are people who are dead that have voted. It means that ballots were counted by local officials, and they did not allow poll watchers to be there. You're seeing the abuse in mail-in ballots. So I like to say there's much more involved. Now, with that being said, obviously it's a conflict of interest. I believe, many believe, it stinks for Stacey Abrams' sister, who got that position through Stacey Abrams working with the previous administration, Biden and Obama. It's interesting why she did not recuse herself. I say Stacey Abrams' sister, she may be a good justice, but a bad politician, and Stacey may be a good politician, but a bad lawyer, to subject her sister to being that close to this case, knowing that they probably had conversations and knowing their siblings, they're going to look out for one another. That was poorly thought of and should never have happened.
And do you think it's important to purge those 4,000 voters from the list? I know, a lot of the accusations around voter fraud are dirty voter rolls. So how important do you think that ruling was?
Well, obviously it was a very important ruling. However, though, it was not in the best light. Here are two siblings. One is a judge, the one who's having the case before the judge, And it's like, one sister's going to look out for the other sister. I just want the law to be followed. We just want free, fair, and transparent elections. And when Stacey Abrams went and cut the deal with the Secretary of State in closed doors, that backroom deal to create this whole environment with the mail-in ballot fraud, that's what bothers me, and that's what bothers most Georgians. And that's one reason, if nothing else, that her sister should not have ruled in this case. There are too many other judges who could have made that decision. Why did she step down? Well, many believe it's because it's another case where election fraud has taken place. Now you have a judge helping her sister to keep her case that should have been thrown out. Actually, keep her case, or her case should have been thrown out, I should say, and she didn't throw it out. That is a big concern with all voters.
I see. And so what are your expectations for Tuesday's vote in terms of how clean or not it will be based on, what happened on November 3rd?
Well, obviously, there's going to be a cloud over this election either way, because people feel, at least half of the people feel in Georgia, that this election has not been free, fair, and transparent. And there's a lot of mistrust right now. There are many people who are concerned, but that's why I'm encouraging them to still go to the polls, still vote, because if they get more votes than we get, then they win, meaning the left win, meaning the lack of transparency wins. Stacey Abrams wins, when in fact this whole thing has been riddled with irregularity. So more people who want to see transparency should vote than those who allowed those backroom deals to take place, and those who have allowed this election to have all these irregularities and not speaking out about it. And let me be clear about one thing. This is not a partisan issue. This should be a bipartisan issue for Democrats and Republicans. And many African Americans feel as though that their votes have not been counted properly, and they've been disenfranchised, because obviously you see where President Trump has gotten a lot more African American support and minority support, and they're really concerned about if their vote was actually counted. For a dead person's vote to be counted and a person who actually vote not be counted, that just doesn't sit well with many of us.
So do you feel like this is becoming a bipartisan issue? Are you talking to other Democrats who also are concerned about the fairness of these elections?
Yeah, any Democrat who believes in democracy, fair and free and transparent elections, they know that there's something not right here, whether they admit it or not, but they know something's not right. And so when I speak, I may support a particular candidate, but when you look at elections should be partisan free. It's about the Constitution. It's about people having their right to vote, that vote to be counted, it to be a legal ballot, and then let the chips fall where they may. But when you look at this election and the backroom deals with Stacey Abrams and the Secretary of State, and they did not allow that to come before the legislature, which the state law or the Constitution allows the General Assembly and the General Assembly only to make laws as it relates to voting in the state of Georgia. And so when you see that being encroached upon and you see that being kept away from legislators, that made it even worse, because we represent the people. They sent us up there to handle their business, and our authority has been usurped. And it's just very unfortunate. And so even after this, and I'm hoping, I wanted the governor to call a special session to address some of these issues. But I do know they're going to be coming in session the second week in January. And I hope then the number one priority would be to fix what happened with Stacey Abrams and Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, and to restore confidence and make sure that our upcoming elections, our future elections are, again, free, fair, and transparent, with no election fraud, that we address all those issues, even the mail-in ballots, which is the most abusive area, as we've seen, and the signature verification. Those measures have to be in place to restore the trust in Georgians and the American people.
Do you think it's going to be too late at that point to restore trust if this, if people feel this election was stolen from them, as a lot of Republicans are feeling right now?
Well, I think it's more than just Republicans. I believe they're Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I feel that way too. And that's why, even with the Dominion system and the machines, I mean, there are some concerns there. So that's why I'm saying to all voters who felt like their vote had not been counted or felt like this was not a free and fair and transparent election, if they don't come out and vote and defeat Warsaw, Runoff, and Ossoff, that's going to allow more of their people to get in there. It's going to create more lack of transparency. It's going to create more socialism. It's going to be more about defunding the police and allowing Antifa and Black Lives Matter to start to continue, continue to harass people physically and verbally, to really not only depress the vote, but suppress and intimidate voters, because that's what they're doing now, intimidating voters. If you don't support their idea or support their candidate, they're literally, physically bringing you harm. That's why I say there should be a hate crime based on party affiliation or party ideology if you're attacked. That's your constitutional right to your freedom of expression. So if you believe in the First Amendment, your freedom of speech, if you believe in the Second Amendment, to be able to bear arms, then you need to come out and vote. We have to have more votes to throw them out or to keep them from getting elected, even if it means not trusting the system. But we got to come out and just double our efforts and double our votes. And again, I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I just don't like these two Democratic candidates in terms of what they stand for. They stand for socialism, defunding the police. They don't want school choice. They want children to remain trapped and failing schools. That's been brought about by Democratic policies. And so if we want to see a balance of power in Washington, they have to come out and vote. And to all the Trumpers out there, please come out. I know our president wasn't treated fairly in many of our eyes, but that should not stop us from coming out. And by the way, the president will be here on Monday evening, this Monday, January 4th, prior to the election. And we believe that's going to have a major impact because many supporters still support this president, at least 74 million.
So you're obviously very passionate about vote integrity, and I know there's been calls for you to run for Secretary of State in 2022. Is that, how seriously are you considering that?
Well, I can say this. Our Secretary of State has failed all Georgians. What Raffensperger did, going in the back room with Stacey Abrams, they created this environment of lack of trust and non-transparency and no free election. My number one concern right now is not my future, but the future of a voting system and a process that's fair, free, and transparent. So I'm working diligently. We'll be working in the upcoming legislature. Although my term ends, I will be lobbying our legislators and actually testifying to make sure that we fix what Raffensperger and Stacey Abrams set up that allowed for election fraud.
So if you run, will you run as a Democrat or a Republican?
Well, let me say this. Again, my focus is not on running. My focus is on representing people with the most intense integrity in terms of trying to fix what they broke and what they allowed to hurt people and their votes. As it relates to me, I can say this. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The party left me. I am not supportive of defunding police. I am not supportive of Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I am not in support of keeping school chores from parents having an opportunity to send their children to a performing school. I'm clearly not for walking over our First and Second Amendment. So the Democratic Party has a lot of issues, including bigotry. Until things change, I'm going to continue to pull the white sheet off the Democratic Party to expose them for what they are. They do not support African Americans who are independent, free thinking with conservative leanings, although they say they have a big tent, which is fraud in itself. And so what I decide to do in the future politically, I'll make sure that your organization is aware of it. And I appreciate what you all do as you reach out to so many people, informing and educating people on the facts. And it's not slanted. You don't shape a particular narrative. You just put the facts out there, let the people make their own decisions. So I look forward to continuing to have a relationship with you as we educate your listeners and viewers, and certainly people who live here in Georgia who want a free, fair, and transparent election.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, a last look at 2020. But first, here's part two of our special America Q&A.
Probably work less, hang out more.
My grades.
Try to spend more time with my family, just enjoy the small things.
because you never know what would happen in the future.
The only thing that I would love people to change is just to love each other, to learn how to love each other.
I honestly don't think I would change anything. I think it's good.
I guess just to stay a lot more focused on my goals, ambition. So 2021, I'm planning to just go hardcore, like finish what I have to do, and then make my dreams come true.
If I could change the COVID, I'll change the COVID. Because that'll make everything back normal, We wouldn't even be going through a lot if it wasn't for the COVID.
More clients, more people reaching their goals of health, like that.
To not have no coronavirus.
Maybe having COVID not affect as dreadfully as it had through 2020, so that 2021 could be a smooth ride.
Probably COVID. It ruined a lot of things for me and him to do, so.
Creating a trend of people respecting and loving each other more. Yeah, I would that would be the greatest thing for me, I think, seeing that. A trend of, trending of people loving and respecting each other more.
Well, I'm thinking about going back to school and finish up my degree in education. I only have a 2-year associate, so I think if I pursue my goal, I would do better for the following year.
The one thing that I would change is our schedule, because like I said, knowing that how much family time is so important. 2021 we'll modify our schedule to spend more family time together.
Start college and pass my SATs.
Get rid of all the masks and all the fear.
Have more courage.
I would like to ask that anyone that has the responsibility of bringing information to the public, to our communities, do so with more of a conscience. As a society, been really bombarded with messages that are supposed to be in our best interest, but that have really eroded our love, our trust, our confidence in all the systems that we need to stay civilized. So in 2021, I hope that we learn something. We learn that we are more alike than we are different. That if we focus on the things that we need to do together, that we have in common, we'll make so much more progress, and that there is no place or space for division and hate because we're all on one planet.
We don't have COVID, and it would benefit not just me, but everybody around me who I love and who I don't even know, but I want world peace.
Well, of course, I would make sure that there was no coronavirus, no COVID-19 anywhere. That would really make everything really wonderful.
Well, definitely we all want to get rid of the pandemic. That's number one. And, just start off fresh with a new leadership that's more uniting and
being more organized or more scheduled. I started working from home this year because of COVID, and it's very hard to keep a regular schedule when every day looks exactly the same, but then your house is a mess and you don't run out of groceries. So if I was a little more scheduled, probably.
Of course, the vaccine's doing their job. That would be amazing. And overall, in general, just people showing care and love for other people in a bigger way.
Just being able to make more time to do yoga and focus on not being so busy in my mind. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people.
A promotion at my work.
I have some health issues, maybe if I had a broken back and so on, have trouble walking. So hopefully I get better.
Let's see here. I want to read a little bit more, get out of my comfort zone with that, and really just, live each moment like it is your last, because you never know. But I don't usually make solid New Year's resolutions, but just kind of do better than the last year.
You're kind of caught off guard with having to all of a sudden be home and everyone be home, like we were in March. And so I think if we get to do that again next year, do better planning on more family activities and kind of plan more for outdoor events to do together.
My life's pretty good right now. I'd really like COVID to go away. I think that'd be good for everybody.
And welcome back. For our next segment, we invited 3 of our favorite guests back to the show to reflect on the strange year of 2020 and to look ahead at 2021. We have Democratic strategist Robin Biro and Richard Baris, he's a director of Big Data Poll, and Mark Tapscott, congressional correspondent for the Epoch Times. 2020 has been an interesting year, to say the least. Why don't we start with, what did you learn in 2020? Maybe there are some things you didn't know before that you know now. Robin, why don't you start?
That we are definitely polarized, much more so than I thought that we were, and that family is super of the utmost importance because, look, one thing that this quarantine and COVID has taught us is we've spent so much time in quarantine with one another. I know exactly how important I am to my small children who are school-aged, who depend on me to help guide them through their distance learning. And I've learned exactly what those teachers are putting up with and forced to deal with every day in the classroom. And I couldn't be more grateful for our teacher, for our educators, for our healthcare providers. I've learned a great deal, Cindy.
Interesting. All right, Mark, how about you? What did you learn in 2020?
Well, one thing for sure to learn is that the U.S. Capitol, when it's deserted, because we're all in this pandemic quarantine, is a lonely place. And that's sad.
All right, and Richard, how about you? What did you learn in 2020?
Well, from a data perspective and a pollster's perspective, I think I learned how easy it is on such little evidence to convince people to undergo such radical change without, sadly, without questioning a little bit more. I think some of what we saw in 2020 was a lot of knee-jerk reacting without thinking through the ramifications, the long-term ramifications, and how easy it really was to shift public opinion. Fear is not something that surprises me as a motivation for shifting public opinion, but I guess I am a little bit shocked on how rapidly we were able to do that, and that's definitely something I learned this year. 2020 taught me a lot about persuasion.
Interesting. I learned that Zoom exists because I hadn't heard of it at the beginning of the year.
True.
And I also learned that a city like New York of, 8.3 million people, it's possible to make people feel isolated and to have them move around such a large city without touching or coming into close contact with other humans in the city. I found that remarkable that was executable. All right, so what do you think were some of the most impactful stories of 2020? Of course, COVID, of course, the election, but you can either pick other things or drill down further into those things. We're not allowed to say those. But what do you think? Mark, why don't you start us off?
I'm especially puzzled by Attorney General William Barr. I'm not exactly sure why, but it seems like there was a real personal pick between him and President Trump at the end. And I'm surprised that Barr apparently let that get to him. I thought he was a better man.
Oh, from the left perspective, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and immediately following that, the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, that was probably the most riveting story for the left of 2020. Second, of course, to COVID, and following that, we all remember when it was 15 cases in the United States, and we were trying to contain that, and look where we are now. Aside from that, socially, I would think the story of Harry and Meghan removing themselves from the royal family, their status with the royal family, and look, California, I think, has been on fire for all of 2020. So there were a lot, and we are closer to war with Iran right now than we've ever been, in my opinion, as a veteran. Aside from that, it's just the election and the president refusing to acknowledge kind of the handwriting being on the wall, Cindy.
All right, and Richard, what's your take on it?
We had a lot of unrest this year, which I do agree with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg pick. That's obviously going to have a long-term impact. It's a very important story. We had a lot of unrest this year, though, which a bit of foreboding for the future, no matter who won this election, which also leads me to really the failure to see the true state of this race, which again was another massive failure. I'm biased because I'm coming at it from a political point of view, of course, but that's a huge story where I come from, because once again, the American people didn't get the coverage they deserved.
And how do you all think the media did in 2020? How would you characterize 2020 from looking at the lens of the media's coverage of the year?
It's been embarrassing.
Can you elaborate?
It really has been. And I say that as someone who devoted the last 30 years to being a journalist.
Robin, do you have a take on that?
Look, I've enjoyed coming on this network. It's been honest. I appreciate the commentary. There are other networks. I've done over 1,500 live shots, and some of the ones this year that I've been asked to do have been absolutely ridiculous. I'm talking about, can I elaborate on gender-neutral gingerbread people that are bakery in California made? These are asinine stories that are not newsworthy at all, and it's doing a disservice to the American public. So, it's the low-hanging fruit, those kind of things. I just can't stand it. Now, we need to look at also what social media is doing, because that has been a massive change in 2020 from what they did in years past. And I don't know, I'm still unsure how comfortable I am with sort of them censoring certain things. And that's going to be something that Congress is going to really have to look at come 2021.
Though I couldn't agree more with that, though. The decisions, the editorial, I guess, decisions, the media made were a little bit inexplicable. I think this was one of their saddest years. We had stories that were being ignored, that of course were politically motivated to make those decisions. We have stories that were being prioritized that were ridiculous, like we just heard. It was not a great year for the media. And as somebody who polls for a living, we see it. We see it in the numbers. It's just going to get worse if there's not a course correction in this industry. It's only going to get worse.
All right, so we're prognosticating for 2021. What other kinds of things will you all be looking at for 2021? Mark, you want to jump in?
I think we need to be very attentive to what Trump does in 2021. If he's not successful, miraculous though it may prove to be, in turning the election around, because he will still be a dominant political personality on the American scene. Like it or not, he'll be around.
Yeah, it's interesting because we haven't had this kind of precedent where the non-political actor was in office, and then what does that character do out of office? Richard, what about you? What are you going to be looking at?
Yeah, the president could be a kingmaker. He could be a kingmaker. That'll be interesting for sure to watch and follow. But for me this year, given that Joe Biden is, at this point, like the last speaker said, it's very difficult for President Trump to do anything at this point. So how bad will censorship get? Will it get worse? It's something that greatly concerns me. We've had problems with it in the past. Will they get more emboldened by it? The media is, dwindling in their duty to oversee that. So I'm going to look to see if some of the things that concern me this year ramp up, or do they scale back because maybe they were politically motivated. Now that they got the outcome they want, they cool off, or will it get worse? I have my own thoughts on it, but that's what I'll be looking for.
Have you been polling questions about trust in media or censorship?
It's as bad as it's ever been. It was bad before the election, and now, we're limited right now. We're polling Georgia, of course, because we have the special election there, but national elections aren't really, a matter right now. So we haven't done much national work, but for the most part, the media is having a very bad time. We typically ask whether they have a great deal of trust, some, none at all, or very little. And between none at all and very little, the media is looking at more than half the country that has a very low opinion of them, does no confidence in them. So it's a bad spot for them to be in. And for the life of me, I can't understand how ideology could outweigh that. But it's their decision to make.
All right, and Robin, back to you.
For 2021, I think immediately, right out the gate, we're going to start hearing more about the national deficit, which has increased by 77% over the last 4 years. That means that every American, their portion is over $63,000. That's going to be a major issue, especially for Republicans. Democrats haven't been bringing this up, and I've been begging them to. So national deficit, I also think that Joe Biden's presidency is going to be pretty boring, and I've called it delightfully boring. So I think the media is going to be laser focused on what in the world President Trump does post-presidency, because that makes for really good television, let's be honest. Other than that, I think it's going to be, some call for us to work across party lines, for maybe Congress to try and do their jobs rather than just fighting one another across the aisles, maybe work together. Initially, at least, that will be the call. Now, President Obama tried that back in 2008, and it didn't last long. But that will be the rallying cry right out the gate, Cindy.
Do you think that's in the cards, Mark?
Compromise. What a concept. I think the federal about that.
All right, so maybe one last question to wrap things up, or we still have a few more minutes. We have to talk about COVID and its impacts. What do you think is going to come home to roost? Where the New York restaurant owners are suing Cuomo and de Blasio. We're seeing a lot more of these kind of motions where people are getting very antsy and fed up with the measures. We're also being told things are probably going to get a whole lot worse. What do you see happening? Richard, why don't you start?
Well, first, what I hope to see happen is a little bit more debate than what we saw for the first go around in the spring. Basically, this conversation has always been laid at our feet as an economic versus a public health question, and that was always a false choice. That was never true. The businesses are rightfully going to get more and more uneasy as time goes on. That's their survival. This has always been a health versus health, because deaths of despair are real. The impact all of these shutdowns are having on mental health, on the economy, that is all real. So in the end, this thing was pushed through with little to no debate. And we are seeing as time goes on, some of these policies were not wise. I mean, that's just a fact now. That's just a reality. And if some of those measures were to have worked, we wouldn't be in the spot that we're in now. So people have to survive. And it's going to come to a point where maybe the more privileged class can afford to call for lockdowns, and maybe they can afford to be more virtuous and moral and high and mighty about it. But the rest of the country is going to reach a point where they have to survive.
Robert, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that there's going to be a mask mandate because there's no way to enforce that. We have one right here where I live in Atlanta. It carries a $15 fine. There have been exactly 0 tickets. It's just not effective. And I do think that we will see a lot more small businesses close, unfortunately, before people really start to get it and probably wear masks and socially distance. But a lockdown, a hardcore lockdown, I hope we don't see that. It's going to be up to people, individual responsibility. I think that's going to be the rallying cry, Cindy.
All right, and Mark, what are your thoughts? Is it going to be, are the politicians going to leave it up to individual responsibility?
The 25 counties with the most COVID cases all have the stringent mask mandate. Mandates don't work.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and I wish you the best in 2021 and hope to see y'all again. And coming up after the break, what do the polls say about Georgia? But first, here's part 3 of our holiday Q&A.
Just need to let her know that she's a great girlfriend and she's a fine dime.
Amanda, you're beautiful. Amanda Bocanegra.
It has to be my mother. I want to thank her for everything she has done, the life she gave me, and how hard she has worked to, provide for me.
My husband, I love him. He's a very dear friend for me.
I guess it'd be Marcos, my boyfriend. He's super hardworking. He's like super dedicated to everything in his life, and I think I just want to say like thank you for everything he's done. He's amazing, and just a little appreciation to him.
My dad, he really makes it happen for me. Anytime I'm down, he's always there to save me. I love him.
You're a damn bucket of sunshine. How about that?
You all look very beautiful today. I think you look so cute.
Shout out to my dad and then my family in general. They mean a lot, and they're always there to support me.
Probably that he's a good skater.
I would say mom. Mom's always get a compliment every day.
The person who is responsible for me being who I am right now, I would say Fabian. She is. She's one of my favorite people in the world because she's just been with me through hard and through the good and the bad and the ugly. And she's my best friend. And she's the greatest person, nicest person, the most selfless person. She's caring to people she doesn't know. And yeah, she's Fabian.
My son, Danny, a good compliment. He's very motivated, and I like that from him. And he sets his goals and realistic, and that inspires me. And he just graduated from real estate, so if he can do it, mom can do it too.
That would be my husband. He has been my support through everything, and I think he is the head of the house, so he had made sure that we definitely spend time together, especially with our newborn.
My teachers for being there for me and working really hard with me in school.
My parents, they're just so kind and giving and forgiving. Just thank you so much for all that you've done for us.
I'd like to compliment my husband, Kim, because he reinvented himself during the pandemic. So he reinvented his business strategy and everything. He just, like Steve Bannon, kept on going.
I'd like to compliment the man in my life. That's David Franklin Taylor. I have loved him for a very long time. We've been together 40 years. We have 2 amazing children and 2 beautiful grandchildren, and we want this world to give them as much joy as we had growing up, no matter what.
Actually, I wanted to give a compliment to my husband. He tolerates me even though we close in the house and we don't have many places to go right now, but he still tolerates me. But I also want to give a little shout out to my friend Anna Summers. She's kind of my role model. She's great. She's doing her real estate business. She started not long time ago, but she's very successful and she loves her family, and Christmas is her favorite holiday. This is what I want to shout out for her, and her birthday is on Christmas Day. So she's always kind of staying aside while everybody celebrates Jesus, but I want her to celebrate her birthday on a manner that she wants to celebrate herself.
I will give my husband, Jim Mann, a compliment because he worked his tail off 2020 and he ran for city council. Although he did not get the place, I've never known anybody to work that hard, and I'm so proud of him.
Oh, my husband. I mean, we've been together almost 46 years, and we've had a wonderful life together, and I definitely appreciate him. You know, he's my rock.
There's so many lovely people. I guess I'd have to give a huge compliment to my husband right now, though. I've had a lot of emotional turbulence this year, and he's really been like a rock of positivity, and I don't know how he does it, but it's amazing.
Let me compliment my friend Amy Huckabee Divers. She is the best mom I have ever known. She is such a good mom to her boys, and I can't say enough great things about her.
Oh, my girl right here, Tammy. Just making sure that we get out together. And my compliment to Tammy is that she's taken time to work on herself to be a better person.
I found generally people are very nice and very helpful. even driving, they let you in.
I'd like to compliment my parents. They've always been there to support me in everything I did. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to get through a lot of things I did in life. So thanks, Mom and Dad.
Maybe my wife. I like to say just be happy wherever going on.
My friends have really, really thrived in this difficult time. They've really, concentrated on bettering themselves this year and bettering other people, and I think they're doing a really good job.
I would tell my wife, you've done a great job this year, I'm proud of you, and let's keep moving forward together.
I would give my children a compliment because they have been flexible and fun and willing to find the fun. And even when they didn't like it, when we said, let's move on, they were willing to move forward. And we've had some really good adventures because we've had to be creative, and they've adapted well. And so that I'd compliment them for that.
I would say I would give my wife a compliment because among all of the other things, she's been almost full-time teacher with our kids. And I think a lot of moms and dads have been that this year. And really just being able to be flexible and help really focus and keep our kids successful.
I think my family, we had a lot of things go on this year, along with some of us that ended up with COVID, and everybody stuck together. Everybody looked out for each other. We called each other a lot. I think it did bring my family closer together. So I'd compliment all of us.
Our next guest has been on the ground in the Peach State, taking the temperature of these all-important Georgian voters. Joining us is Craig Keshishian. He's a senior advisor for InsiderAdvantage. Craig, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Cindy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. So you've been on the ground in Georgia. The election is on Tuesday. Can you start by giving us some insight into what you're seeing there?
Well, I'm not only on the ground, I'm above the earth with my technology. We are scanning the early vote with care, and we're looking at events on the ground as well. And we do hope to see that Republican turnout on Election Day takes a lovely momentum. If it does, we think that conceivably both candidates can pull off a victory. If not, then I foresee consequences for the Republican Party on that front. I think that they either will both lose or one will lose if turnout is not as strong as it should be on the 5th of January.
So it's a game of turning out to the polls. Right now, all the polls are showing a very tight race for both senators. I guess a statistical tie. Do you concur with that? Is that what you're seeing too?
Absolutely. We've been, our colleague Robert Kahali at Trafalgar and Matt Towery and I here at InsiderAdvantage have been polling carefully, and we've been communicating with each other. And frankly, both of our polls have seen extraordinarily tight margins within, I'd say, 1 or 1.5 points max between victory and losing, between being ahead and being behind. That's how tight it is. It truly is. In 40 years of being an academic pollster and a political pollster, I have never seen a more complex race to poll, Cindy. This race had more twists and turns, more moving parts about it than any other race I've been in other than this last presidential election, frankly.
Can you give us some insight into that? How does that affect polling? What do you mean by that?
Oh, sure. Well, you have an early vote, then you have an early mail-in vote, and then you have a day vote, and you have a tremendous infusion of money with an advertising cycle in terms of real dollars and cents that's off the charts. I've never seen $400, $500, $500 million, literally $500 million pumped into one state for 2 races. And the other odd duck factor is that there are not one Senate runoff, but 2 Senate runoffs. So the complexity of that, the changing dynamics within the state of Georgia have also been difficult to track. There's been a massive infusion of new residents. There's been a massive enrollment of new voters. There's been a difficult divide between suburb and rural voting, whereas the suburbs around Atlanta, the donut suburbs around Atlanta and Savannah, have trended to the Democratic Party. In fact, the past Republican legislatures in the state, Matt Towery, my partner, for example, who was an assemblyman from Buckhead, he could not get reelected today as a Republican in his own district. So the dynamics of the voting patterns have changed so quickly in Georgia, it makes it difficult to trace.
Very interesting. So you said that there's been a massive enrollment of new voters. Is that people that didn't vote in November, or is that people that recently moved into the state? Do you know?
I do know. It's not an infusion of new voters coming across state lines to vote. It's been, from what we see, an organic movement to enroll voters who did not vote in the 2020 presidential. There are about 65,000 of those folks. So I have to hand it to both ground games. They were able to secure new voters and find them, seek them out and find them in this highly competitive environment. So this is going to be a titanic battle between who can rally the most voters on election day. The Democratic turnout for early voting was strong, but not as strong as, in my view, without getting technical about it, their presidential turnout last November. So that bodes somewhat promising news for the Republican candidates. But on the other hand, they won't be able to pull this off without a very powerful turnout for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. And the stakes are so high, I hope that they do.
Do you think that we'll actually know a result on election night?
Great question, Cindy. That is the question that's the $64,000 question. And I think you are right. You are not going to find out election results on election night. I think this will drag on. I think this will probably ensue, have lawsuits that come about from this exercise. Lawsuits will ensue. This will be a 2 to 3 week issue to resolve. At the end of the day, they're still trying to decide who won in New York 22, up the congressional seat up in New York 22. Claudia Tenney is ahead by like 8 votes. That was back in November. So you can only imagine the pressure there will be to get this vote counted. And the stakes are so high, lawsuits will fly.
Right. And I mean, truthfully, we're still looking very closely at Georgia. The difference, between Joe Biden and Trump is just 12,700 or
right.
something close to that. So that still doesn't feel
That's
settled.
right.
How much do you think all the turmoil over that race has affected voters going into the November or the January 5 vote?
Of course. Again, another great question. I think it effectively demoralized a lot of honorable folks who thought that their vote, once they post it, counts, and that the voting franchise, in their view, was intact with high integrity. Well, we all learned that that's not necessarily the case, is it? In fact, my hunch is that it's not. And of course that demoralizes traditional voters who work hard to realize that their vote should count and ought to count. And when they see that shenanigans may have taken place and that the count was off and buckets of votes appearing in the wee hours after polling observers leave, that sends a chilling signal to these folks that maybe their vote doesn't count and maybe they ought to just sit this one out. I hope they understand that the risks of doing that are high and grave if they sit back. They have to engage and vote on election day. Please don't do that. Your vote will count. There are thousands of poll watchers now that have been, that are coming out, which is a good thing. That's an exercise of democracy, and everybody should embrace that. It's not suppression. It's enhancement. It basically ensures that if you're going to vote legitimately and honorably, that your vote will count. So Republicans ought to know that the integrity of this upcoming election will be high, I hope, and that this should not discourage them from going out. In fact, they need to get out.
So if you're expecting, higher integrity around this election, what do you think those post-election lawsuits are going to circle around?
Well, the count of absentee ballots. This is where it really gets into the nitty-gritty, Cindy, and where I think a lot of shenanigans take place. The so-called provisional ballots that require interpretation and fortune telling are the things that really annoy me. I mean, if somebody just marks a ballot and and it's just like a little chicken scratch, what's that mean? That's in the eye of the beholder. Is that really a vote? I don't know. There are people who will send in things and slip them underneath the door and claim that that's a legitimate vote. Does that count? Well, maybe in New York it does. It ought not to. The way you go about these things is with a sense of security. You show your voter ID, at least you show some sort of picture ID to identify who you are. Or if it's an absentee ballot, you matched up with a signature on your envelope with your ballot. That's why we fight so hard to keep this process highly honorable. And you don't want us to drift into a country like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. I've been to both, and I've seen how people vote there. It's like it's not even an exercise. It's a joke. Don't let that happen here. That's why I think that this election will have some hiccups at the end, because our friends on the Democratic side will scratch and claw for every odd-looking ballot that there is, ballots that should not even count. So that's why you'll see litigation.
So we have to wrap up. Let me just ask you one very quick question to end this. How much of an impact has David Perdue's quarantine in the final days of the election had, do you think?
I don't think much. I think the president is the biggest force in Georgia politics. He's coming out on Monday. He is a behemoth in Georgia politics. He will suck up all the air, and I think he'll more than make up for David Perdue's quarantine.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Craig. And of course, we will all be watching Georgia on Tuesday.
Thank you, Cindy.
That's all for tonight's show. Thank you so much for watching The Nation Speaks. Join us again at our new time every Saturday, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. And from all of us here, have a very happy New Year.